Hi, enjoy listening. Where the Sun Still Rises. A novel-length short story by me. Some things break suddenly. Others, they just wear down. That's how Dr. Mark Whitaker thought about his marriage. At 38, he was living in a 2-bedroom rental on the edge of Charlottesville, Virginia. The walls were too white. The fridge was mostly empty, except for Greek yogurt, apples, and half a bottle of wine. And every evening, the silence pressed in like a second skin. 15 years he had been married to Natalie. Childhood sweethearts, practically neighbours since middle school. Their parents had been best friends, always joking that fate had decided their children's path. And at first, maybe it had. They had Ethan, their son, when they were still too young to know what forever truly demanded. But love isn't just shared history or chemistry or the desire to make it work. Sometimes, two people just outgrow each other. Mark hadn't wanted the divorce. Not really. He clung to the idea of trying, until Natalie's tired eyes told him that trying wasn't enough. She had moved on quickly, too quickly. Within months, she was dating someone new, an investment guy. Expensive watch, fancy car, good with Ethan, but without the patience to be a real dad. Ethan had chosen to stay with her. Mark didn't blame him. The house was bigger. The fridge was fuller. There was always laughter echoing off those sleek kitchen tiles. Still, every Sunday when Ethan came over, Mark tried to make the little apartment feel like home. He hid the loneliness well. But Ethan, who had his father's quiet eyes, probably saw right through it. Then James Whitaker, Mark's father, collapsed. It started as chest pain, then shortness of breath. One urgent care visit became a hospital stay. Tests confirmed the worst: aortic valve failure. Surgery was needed. Boston. $160,000 with travel and post-op rehab. Mark's mother, Elaine, cried at the kitchen table when the insurance denial letter came. "We can't lose him, Mark," she whispered. "Not like this." Mark stared at the paper, numb. A man could dedicate his life to medicine, save hundreds of lives, and still not afford to save his own father. That's when Trevor showed up. "Dude," he said one night at the hospital cafeteria, "you ever think about going international?" He thought of his father, his mother's trembling hands, the envelope with the bill. He thought of Ethan, the one person he could not bear to lose faith in him. And then he said yes. Elaine cried again when he told her. "Mark," she said, gripping his hand, "please, you don't have to do this." He tried to smile. "Mum, I'm not going to war. I'm going to help. I've been given a gift and I'm using it." "You're my only son," she whispered. "If something happens to you." He hugged her tightly. "Nothing will. I promise." Luamba, Angola. The heat struck like a fist the moment he stepped off the transport. They housed him with 7 other international doctors and nurses. It was a stripped-down medical compound. Half tents, half repurposed school buildings. There was dust in the corners, clean beds, a generator that roared all night, and medicine that ran out faster than they could restock it. But people came in droves. Mothers with feverish babies, miners with rotted teeth, farmers bitten by snakes or burned in oil spills. The stories were endless, the need overwhelming. Mark operated. He cleaned wounds. He stitched with patience. He learned to speak 3 words of Portuguese and smiled through the rest. He felt useful for the first time in years. One morning, Trevor showed up with that familiar gleam in his eye. "Hey, Mark, got something?" "No. Listen, this guy, local chief, some kind of businessman, can't travel, wants a house call, simple checkup. They'll pay us both $1,000, cash." "Trevor, we're not supposed to leave the compound without clearance." Trevor shrugged. "Don't be such a Boy Scout. Come on, in and out. You need the money, don't you?" He went. Halfway down a red dirt road, a burst of sound split the air. Gunfire. The Jeep spun. Screams, dust, chaos. The last thing Mark remembered was Trevor shouting and jumping from the vehicle. And then, nothing. He woke to cool fingers on his forehead. A palm-thatched ceiling swayed above him. The scent of herbs. A humming sound. Birds outside. And a voice. Soft. Feminine. Speaking English. "You're awake." He turned, groggy, wincing. A young woman with radiant brown skin, honey-coloured eyes, and a head wrap of indigo silk smiled down at him. "My name is Sasha," she said. He blinked. "How do you know English?" She chuckled. "My father taught me. He was American, paratrooper, stationed here in the 1980s. He stayed, fell in love with my mother." Mark stared. "He stayed?" "For her, yes, until he died when I was 11. She gently replaced the cool cloth on his head. "You were lucky. You landed in bushes. Concussion. No broken bones. My people found you." "My people," she said. And he realized she meant it literally. A village. One of the few not touched by roads or phones or war. She looked at him again. "You're safe now. You can rest." Mark stayed in the village for over a week. The people didn't speak much English, but their kindness didn't need translating. They brought him water in hand-carved bowls, cooked porridge with ground peanuts and cassava, and smiled as if he were one of their own. He was given a mat inside a small hut, with banana leaves on the roof and woven mats for walls. Goats wandered freely. Children peeped through the doorway and giggled at the sight of the pale-skinned outsider with bandages. And Sasha, she was always nearby. She changed his dressings, washed his clothes, sat outside with him at night, when the heat gave way to breeze, and the fireflies lit the bush like stars fallen to earth. She told him about her childhood, how her father, Daniel Monroe, had stayed after the war to marry her mother, Alma. How the locals had never truly accepted her. "They called me a ghost child," she said once, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Neither white nor black, neither here nor there." "I'm sorry," Mark said softly. "I'm not," she replied. "I learned how to live between things, between cultures, between memories. I think that's where all the most interesting people live anyway." He looked at her then, the flicker of firelight dancing in her eyes, and felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. One morning, as Sasha was grinding spices for breakfast, Mark asked, "Why didn't you leave?" She didn't look up. "Leave where?" "This village. You speak perfect English. You could go anywhere, work anywhere." "I did, for a while. Luanda, Nairobi. But cities are lonely in a different way. And out there, I'm always someone's curiosity. Here, at least I know the rules. But you don't belong here." She paused. "Neither do you," she said quietly. "But maybe we both belong with each other." 3 days later, the rescue team arrived. It turned out Trevor had gone straight to the compound after the ambush, claiming they'd been attacked without warning. A search party had been dispatched, combing through back roads and hills. When they found Mark, weak but alive, the medics nearly cried. Sasha stood beside him as they loaded him into the truck. She was barefoot, arms crossed, a sadness in her face that made Mark's throat close. "I want you to come with me," he said. "Back to the mission." Sasha hesitated. "They won't want me there." "I will," he said simply. "I want you there." And that was that. There was tension when they returned. Mark was barely inside the gates when the mission chief pulled him aside. "Do you know what could have happened to you?" "Yes," Mark said. His voice calm. "I lived it." Trevor was nowhere to be found. Word had spread quickly. He had jumped ship, abandoned Mark, lied to the mission board. A formal complaint had been filed. The next morning, Trevor was escorted out by UN peacekeepers and flown back to the States. No one said goodbye. Sasha was given a temporary role at the mission. Translator, aide, coordinator. She worked quietly, respectfully, and with an efficiency that earned admiration from even the coldest doctors. At night, she and Mark would sit beneath the stars and talk. And once, under the African moon, they kissed. By the time Mark's contract ended 4 months later, the money he had earned was enough. More than enough. For his father's surgery and the long rehab that followed. Sasha came with him. It wasn't even a question. They flew to Boston together, fingers laced across the airplane armrest. At the hospital, James Whitaker opened his eyes after surgery and saw his son standing beside him, whole, alive, older somehow. And beside him, a beautiful young woman with kind eyes and a quiet grace. "Dad," Mark said, "this is Sasha." Back in Virginia, Mark's mother was stunned. Not by Sasha's accent or her dark skin or the gold hoop she wore, but by the way she looked at her son, like he was the only person in the world. Elaine served tea. Sasha helped with dishes. By the end of the visit, Elaine had given her an heirloom quilt and asked when the wedding would be. Sasha didn't speak much about her father until they found his parents, the Monroes, in a quiet suburb of New Jersey. They opened the door, saw her face, and gasped. Mrs. Monroe trembled as she lifted a photo from the mantel. He never came back. We were told he disappeared. Never heard another word. Sasha nodded. He stayed. For love. For me. They held her for a long time. No one spoke. The photo sat between them on the couch. The young soldier with a crooked smile, and the daughter who carried his eyes. 1 month later, Mark and Sasha married in the backyard of his parents' home. Ethan stood beside him as best man. Sasha wore a cream dress with hand-embroidered patterns from Luamba. They served both Southern comfort food and Angolan stew. Guests danced to a mix of jazz and tribal drums. Laughter mixed with tears. It was perfect. Mark looked at her as they stepped into the house afterward, the sunlight haloing around her face. "You brought me back to life," he whispered. "No," she smiled. "You just needed someone to remind you how to live." 6 months later, Mark sat on the porch swing before dawn, coffee in hand. Sasha joined him, wrapped in a blanket, her head on his shoulder. In the east, the sun slowly rose over the trees, golden and tender, lighting the dew like diamonds. "I used to be afraid of mornings," Mark said. "They meant waking up to more silence. And now," he kissed her forehead, "now they mean another day beside you." And the sun rose higher, and he was not alone. If you like the story, I would be very happy to have your support. Click the thumbs up. And to not miss new stories, subscribe and click on the bell. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and all the best.